Hey guys, it's Lotus and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to continue on with our read-along of Erha. Let's jump right into it. Chapter 70. This Venerable One Returns. Chuaning wasn't some weakling that just anybody could threaten. There was a flash of golden light. Moran could have sworn he saw some kind of weapon in his hand, but it was gone in less than an instant. And both of Xiaoman's hands had already been sheared clean off, wrists and all. Xiaoman screamed and stumbled backwards. He only had one usable leg left now that even his hands were gone. The hand seizing Chuaning dropped to the ground. Chuaning stood up, enraged, expression dark like never before. His lips moved slightly like he might say something, but in the end, he seemed too angry for words and turned away instead, face ashen. Moran hurriedly rushed over and pulled him into his arms. "Shidi, are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" In his arms, Chuaning only shook his head, too disgusted to speak. For all that, this Xiaoman in front of them was merely an illusion of someone who had once lived 200 years ago. Chuaning wiped the blood splatters from his face and said to Moran in a low voice, "As you saw, staying here wouldn't be any safer for me than going out there with you. I can take care of myself. I won't slow you down." Moran had heard about the little Shidi's skill from Xuemeng before, but he had never seen it for himself until just now. It was, admittedly, quite eye-opening. "Sure, you're pretty impressive, but..." Chuaning pushed harder. "I'm also familiar with all kinds of weapons, so I can give you pointers from the side." "But..." Chuaning lifted his eyes. Won't you trust me? Won't you trust in me just this once?" Shishong." He had meant to emphasize the sincerity of his words, but with this young, tender voice, it came out all softly adorable instead. Almost like he was acting cute. Chuaning was flabbergasted. Moran blinked, then started rapidly scratching his head in confusion and going, before burying his face in both hands. A long moment passed with his face in his hands before he said, See, I'm just worried that you, 2 whole lives, and this was the first time a little one had called out this softly to him. Moran really felt so close to him just now, as if they were brothers by blood. When he hated someone, he hated them to the bone. But to those he cherished, he was extremely tender. And so, when he finished clawing his head, and finally looked back up at Chuaning from where he was crouched down, the tips of his ears turned red. If only he really did have a little brother, maybe it wouldn't have been so lonely. Unfortunately for Moran, his reaction was noticed. Chuaning hesitated a little, then tried, experimentally, in a small voice, "Shuga." Shuga was an even more familiar form of address than Shishong. Moran braced his forehead against a hand, seriously at his limit. Ugh. Chuaning glanced knowingly at Moran and mentally filed away his weak point. Ooh. Anyway, he was in a child's body right now, and Moran hadn't the slightest who he actually was. There was nothing to get embarrassed about, so he opened his mouth again, and out came a soft, sticky, "Guh." ... "Guh-guh." ... "Moran Guh-guh." Okay, I'll take you, stop saying that. Moran jumped to his feet, face bright red, rubbing the goosebumps on his arms. "Alright, fine, come along then, you win, okay? You win, oh my god." Moran has a guh-guh, kink confirmed. Hands clasped behind his back, Chuaning tilted his head and said with a tiny smile, "Let's go then." As he walked leisurely toward the door, he could hear Moran mumbling quietly from behind him. "Where in heavens did he learn that from? I nearly died from sugar overdose. Holy crap!" Chuaning was originally in a dreadful state of mind from what happened before with Chu Shun, but now he felt the gloom in his chest slowly lifting. Suddenly, he heard Moran ask, "Oh yeah, what was Shidi going to say earlier?" Chuaning turned around and replied evenly, That. I forgot. If I remember it later, I'll tell Moran Guh-guh then." Stop! Don't say that one! Shishong is fine! Shishong is enough!" Moran waved his hands frantically. Chuanning's eyes were like a pair of deep puddles. The corners of his lips quirked with a hint of a smile. If you say so, Shishong. Anyway, I think the Ghost King will be showing up soon, since this illusion is based on the memories of survivors, and those survivors have left Linnan by now, so the illusion probably won't last much longer. That makes sense. We should be able to get out once we defeat him, right? I'm gonna find whoever it was that manifested the illusion and try to kill us. Chuanning nodded. Fortunately for us, judging by the battle with Chu Shun earlier, this Ghost King isn't too strong. In fact, he might be the weakest among the 9 kings. Although the illusion has been manifested, it seems to me that whoever did it probably thought I was just an ordinary 6-year-old and didn't expect me to actually be able to help take care of this. Moran nodded along. Sounds about right. Chuanning continued. So, rather than saying that he tried to kill us, it would be more accurate to say that I was never part of the equation. He's actually only after Shishang. Moran nodded even more rigorously. It checks out. After we get out of here, Shishang must make sure to tell Shuemeng about this. Something is afoot at the Peach Blossom Springs. We have to be careful from here on out. But let's not dwell on that for the time being. Shishang, please lead the way. I won't slow Shishang down. Chuanning's prediction was spot on. 3 in the morning, the massacre in the city was winding down. A bloody rift cracked open in the sky suddenly, green smoke pouring onto the wreckage and solidifying into the shape of a hunched-over man. The man's eyes were bright scarlet and his skin was ashen pale. Half of his body had flesh and skin, but the other half was stark, exposed bone. He stalked across the corpse-littered city with a black banner in tow, absorbing the pain and resentment of the newly deceased as he passed. Moran looked at the man's face from where they were hidden. So it's him? There was a hint of relief in his voice. It was obvious to Chuanning why he sounded relieved, but he didn't intend to reveal himself just yet, and a 6-year-old can't know too much. So he looked up at Moran with feigned cluelessness. What? You guessed right. The 9 kings of the Ghost Realm differ in strength, and this one is indeed the weakest among them. Moran watched the figure approach from behind a window, saying in a quiet voice, We lucked out. What does Shishong think our odds are? 90%. Always best to not be too overconfident, you know? Chuanning smiled a little. Of course he knew that the Skeleton King was the weakest of the 9 Ghost Kings, but strength was relative. With Moran's age and experience, even with the holy weapon Jiangui at his side, going up against the Skeleton King alone was still pushing it a bit. Unfortunately for the person plotting against Moran, the kid by his side wasn't just any rookie from Shishang Peak, but Chuanning himself. Help me! They were just about to burst out the door with a surprise attack when a weak voice called out from behind. Ah, he's still alive? Moran's eyes were wide as he turned to look at Xiaoman curled up in the back. I don't want to die. Dad, I don't want to... Chuanning looked at the young man curled into a rumpled heap of rags and shook his head. By then, this person had likely died as soon as he stepped in here, but he's still alive in this illusion probably because we happened to be here and killed the undead that were after him, so some things turned out differently. Sigh. If he hadn't defected, do you think that maybe Chu Shun wouldn't have died 200 years ago? That maybe Linnan wouldn't just be a pile of ruins now? Maybe. But they both knew that, no matter what they did now, the past was the past. The important thing right now was to defeat the Skeleton King and get out of this illusion, and there was no reason to delay, so they charged out from their hiding place, killing everything in their way. Getting out of this illusion might be even easier than they had thought. Moran knew exactly what he had to do, and engaged the Skeleton King without delay. But watching them face off, Chuanning felt a wave of uneasiness. It wasn't because Moran was struggling. Quite to the contrary. Under his guidance, Moran maintained a solid upper hand. But more and more, Chuanning felt that the person behind all this had planned everything out far too precisely. That is to say, that person had carefully assessed that it would be extremely difficult for just Moran and one other person of average skill to get out of this situation. But he also didn't use anything more deadly than this, so as to not rouse any suspicions of foul play. His goal was to make it look like Moran died in a training accident. Whom exactly was this person, to plan so meticulously against Moran's life? Was it really that fake Gochen from Jincheng Lake? Chuaning watched the ferocious battle between Moran and the Ghost King. The longer it went on, the more Moran came out on top, and as the sky slowly lightened, the Ghost King's strength gradually waned. Victory was all but in hand. But just then, among that horde of undead and demons sealed behind Moran's spell, Chuaning suddenly saw the face of a living person. Who is it? Amidst the walking corpses, half of that person's face was shadowed beneath the hood of his cloak. From this distance, all he could see was a sharp chin, sweetly colored lips, and a gently curved nose. Just one look, and Chuaning could tell that this person didn't belong in the illusion of 200 years past. He wasn't in any kind of fighting stance, only shrouded under his hood, looking in Chuaning and Moran's direction. Seeing that Chuaning had noticed him, he smiled faintly, then lifted a hand and swept it across his neck in a kill gesture. Chuaning cursed under his breath and lunged to try and capture him. But that person only kept smiling, crimson lips and ivory teeth under his hood, and mouthed what looked like goodbye. Then he turned and disappeared. "Stay right there!" It was useless. The sky brightened, layers of fish scale clouds painting across it. The fight between Moran and the Ghost King ended with one final blow. The very moment that Jian Gui sheared the Ghost King's head clean off, sending foul blood flying everywhere, their bodies were abruptly tossed up, and that sunrise of ancient Linan from 200 years ago, the ruined wreckage of the city, all of it sped away in a blur. Thump! When Chuaning hit the ground again, he found himself back at the testing cave. Moran was also here, dropped on the ground next to him, covered in blood from the fight, but mostly not his own. He was laid out on the ground, clearly still too tired to get up, only gazing at Chuaning with those pitch-black eyes. A few moments passed, then he lifted a hand and gently poked Chuaning's forehead. "We made it!" Chuaning but his expression was dark. "I saw someone in there just now." "What?" "It was probably the spellcaster." Moran rolled up, his eyes going wide. "You saw him? You saw him? Did you see who it was? What did he look like?" Chuaning shook his head, brows furrowed. "He was wearing a hood. I couldn't see clearly. But based on the figure, he should be male, fairly young, thin with a pointed chin." But he didn't voice the rest of his thoughts. He felt like this half of a face looked vaguely familiar, as if he had seen this person somewhere before, long ago. But he also couldn't shake the feeling that he might be mistaken. It was only half of a face after all, and there were plenty of similar-looking people out there, so he couldn't really be sure. He was deep in thought when he felt Moran pat him on the shoulder. "Shidi." "What is it?" "Look over there." Moran's voice was low, with a chill in it. Chuaning looked up in the direction he was pointing. It was 18. At the entrance to the testing cave, 18 hung from the ceiling, both eyes bulging outwards, the embroidered satin shoes on her feet swaying in midair. She was already dead, and there was no wind here. Judging by the angle of her body's sway, the murderer had just left. But the thing that turned their faces pale was the murder weapon wrapped tightly around her neck. It was a willow vine. With sharp blade-like leaves, the vine coursed with a fiery red light that crackled, erupting with sparks that fell together with the drops of blood. Jian Gui. The thing that strangled 18 and hung her from the roof of the cave was none other than the holy weapon Jian Gui. End of chapter 70. Author's notes. Disguise. Didn't you want to take me off in the last chapter? I'll take it off for you now. Chuaning. The opportunity has passed. You can just be good and stay on me. Apathetic expression. Yeah, Chuaning was so close to revealing his identity, but then, because he had to act all cutesy to Moran to convince him to take him with him, he couldn't reveal his identity anymore because he would be too embarrassed. But yeah, so in chapter 70, Chuaning, of course, is, remember, Yuheng Elder, and so he's able to easily evade and chop off Xiaoman's hands, freeing himself. And then he acts all cutesy and pretty much acts all sugary and cute to get Moran to cave in, and so Moran takes him with him, and Moran goes against the Ghost King. Now, luckily, the Ghost King is the weakest king in the illusion, And so Moran is able to easily defeat the Skeleton King, the Ghost King. And while Moran is busy doing that, Chua Ning actually sees the perpetrator, the person who constructed this whole plot to kill Moran. He only got to see half of their face, but he feels like they're vaguely familiar. Who could this person be that Chua Ning is familiar with? And after defeating the Ghost King, they were able to come back from the illusion, but upon returning, they find out that 18 has been murdered with Jiangui. How could that be? Moran had Jiangui on him. Was he fighting 18, but he thought he was actually... Was he like in the illusion and he thought he was fighting the Ghost King, but he was actually fighting 18 in real life? And he didn't know? Or does someone else have another copy of Jiangui? Maybe someone from the first life, Moran's first life. Lot to think about. Okay, let's move on to the next chapter, guys. Chapter 71. This venerable one's been framed. Face ashen, Moran was in utter disbelief as he summoned the weapon that he had just put away a moment ago. Jiangui answered his call, appearing in his hand in a blaze of fiery light. Comparing the two, the weapon that killed 18 was practically identical to Jiangui, almost like a piece of it, save for the fact that it had no hilt. Could it be that there was a second Jiangui in this world? But before he could think on it, urgent footsteps approached at a rapid speed. Chua Ning was more level-headed than Moran. He quickly assessed the situation, and a chill flickered through his eyes. Moran, put Jiangui away! What? Too late. A group of people had already arrived at the entrance to the cave. There were people from the Feathered Tribe, cultivators from the various sects. Even Xuemeng, Ye Wangxi, and Shimei were there. It was as if someone had noticed that something strange was happening here and called just about everyone over in a hurry. And so, when everyone arrived, one after the other, the sight that greeted them was that of 18, brutally murdered, the willow vine cutting into her neck, and behind her, Moran and a small child, battered from clearly having just fought a fierce battle. Moran covered in blood and holding Jiangui in hand, the willow vine coursing with a menacing fiery light. No one made a sound, until someone suddenly yelled, "Murderer!" The crowd began to clamor, panic, anger, and whispered words surging into a river, the drone of voices shaking the very bones. "She's dead! Murderer! How vicious! Must be insane! Lunatic!" Fragments of words were repeated over and over, the frenzied mob looking no different from the walking corpses in the illusion just now. And for a moment, Moran almost thought that the illusion was not yet over, that the nightmare still continued. Almost as if the blood spilt in Linan 200 years ago still covered the ground. No! He took a step backward, throat dry. It wasn't me! He felt a tug on his clothes, and his step paused. Amidst the madness, he looked down and saw Chua Ning's clear eyes. He murmured helplessly, "It wasn't me!" Chua Ning nodded and tried to shield him behind himself, but he was only a small child right now. What could he do? As he fretted, he felt Moran step forward. More and more people joined in on the shouting. "Lock him up! The kid too! Grab them! Murderers!" "We can't let them get away! They're too dangerous! Hurry and grab them!" Moran pulled Chua Ning behind himself, blocking him from sight, then took a moment to breathe and collect himself. "I didn't kill Miss 18! Please let me explain!" The faces in the crowd looked blurry, overlapping with a memory from the past life that he couldn't bear to remember. He strained to see Xuemeng amongst the shadows in the crowd, his face filled with disbelief, and then he saw Shimei, eyes wide and face pale, his head shaking repeatedly. Moran closed his eyes and spoke in a low voice. "I didn't kill her, but I don't plan to run away either. At least hear me out before you lock me up." But even so, no one wanted to listen to him. Anger and anxiety spread through the crowd. A high-pitched female voice yelled, You got caught red-handed. What even is there to say? That's right. Just toss them in lockup first. If it turns out they didn't do it, we can just let them out then. Lock them up. Lock them up. Shuemeng snapped out of his shocked state. He stepped out from the crowd and stood in front of those angry, twisted faces with his back to Moran and raised his voice. Everyone, please calm down. I have something to say. Who the hell are you? Why should we listen to you? Wait, isn't that the little phoenix? Little phoenix? You mean the darling of the heavens? That's Shuemeng? That's him. Shuemeng's expression was terrible, nearly colorless. He took a deep breath and said slowly, Everyone, please listen. Both of them are disciples of Shisheng Peak, and I can vouch that they absolutely wouldn't do something like murder an innocent person, so please calm down and let them explain first. A moment of silence, then someone yelled, And why should we believe you? So what if they're from Shisheng Peak's disciples? That doesn't mean you know their true nature. Exactly. There's no knowing what someone's really like, even if you're from the same sect. Shuemeng's expression grew even darker, lips pressed in a thin line as his hands clenched into fists. Behind him, Moran stood with Chuaning in tow. Truth be told, he was surprised when Shuemeng came out in his defense. He hadn't exactly been close with this cousin of his in the past life, or rather, they could hardly even stand one another. And later, when he became the emperor of the human realm and burned, killed, and plundered as he liked, the two of them had naturally ended up on opposite sides of the battle. So he never expected that Shuemeng would stand with his back to him, facing the horde and all of their pointed fingers. Moran felt warmth flood his heart. Shuemeng, you believe me? Ugh, yeah right, you damn mutt! Shuemeng's face turned slightly toward him as he huffed. Look at this mess you got into. Aren't you the older one? Why do I gotta clean up after you? ... But after he got done cursing out Moran, he whipped back around and started yelling at those people in an even more fierce tone. What? How would I not know them? One of them is my shudi, and the other is my cousin. Who knows them better, me or the lot of you? Shuemeng, would it kill you guys to listen to a bit of explanation? With all these people here, it's not like they're gonna grow wings and fly off if you give them a couple of minutes. At this time, Shinmei also stepped out, but his mannerisms were far too soft to be imposing, and there was fright in his voice as he said, Everyone, I can also vouch for them. They definitely wouldn't have hurt Miss 18, so please hear them out. Thank you. Even Ye Wangshi stepped forward. Although he didn't vouch for them, he was much calmer than the rest of the agitated crowd. He said, even if it's a temporary detainment, they should still at least get the chance to explain and defend themselves. Otherwise, we might be letting the real killer off the hook. What if that person is amongst us as we speak? What then? At his words, the people in the crowd immediately started looking at one another with alarm in their eyes. Fine, we'll hear you out first. But we're still going to lock you up. Don't be too cautious after all. Guilty until proven innocent. Moran let out a breath and folded his hands against his forehead, and then, after a moment, actually smiled. I never would have thought that, surrounded on all sides, there would still be people willing to believe in me. Okay, even if I get locked up just for you three, I won't be mad about it. He simply and briefly went over what had happened, from the manifestation of the illusion and the events that had transpired within, to finding 18 murdered upon exiting the illusion. Unfortunately, once a domain of fiends scenario had been overcome, a brand new illusion is created for the next person to enter, so there was no way to check if Moran was telling the truth or not. But it did seem like a stretch for him to have come up with such an elaborate story in such little time if he was making it up. So by the time he finished, more than half of the people in the crowd already seemed to be wavering. A higher-up of the feathered tribe spoke quietly to her subordinate, then said, Moran, Sha Suni, although the two of you have presented explanations, you have no evidence. For the safety of the Peach Blossom Springs, we will have to detain you until the matter has been resolved. Moran smiled helplessly. All right, I figured as much anyway. I won't complain too much as long as you feed me. That's a matter of course. She paused before continuing. Henceforth, everyone please be on your guard to prevent any further accidents. All who did not arrive here in time will be questioned one by one to eliminate any suspicions. Furthermore, I will be informing the leaders of each sect, especially Shishang Peak, which is most heavily involved. If possible, I would like to invite your Shizun here for a chat. Shizun? Moran's expression changed immediately. Chuaning stood quietly without a word. I don't want Shizun to come. Will my uncle do? Issues involving the disciple shall be reported to the master. This has always been the rule in the cultivation world. Is it different at Shishang Peak? No, but... Moran scratched his head in frustration, letting out one sigh after another, but didn't know what to say. Issues involving the disciple shall be reported to the master. Of course that made sense. But even just thinking about Chuanning's indifferent face and those crisp, cold eyes, and Moran was already certain that if he were to come, he'd definitely just give him a dressing down first and foremost, regardless of right or wrong. He'd rather not see him at all. But no matter what he said, there was nothing he could do. Both he and his little Shudi got locked up. The lockup at the Peach Blossom Springs was a cave, not very big, but also not too small. Its entrance covered by ancient brambles that only listened to the commands of the Feather Tribe. The inside never saw the light of day, but thankfully there was a fire pit with enchanted flames that burned continuously. The furnishings inside were simple. A wide, plain bed of stone padded with golden red cushions made of woven feathers, a stone table and 4 stone stools, 1 copper mirror, and a couple sets of bowls and cups. Moran and Chuaning were imprisoned here together. Although judgment had yet to be passed, the one in charge of them seemed to have been close with 18. 18 lost her life for no reasons at all, so the Feather Tribe guard took it out on them by making their lives more difficult. On the first night, the guards still knew to deliver some food. It wasn't great or much, but there was enough to eat. However, by the second day, there were only some raw meat, vegetables, rice, flour, and salt tossed casually into the cave, along with something about not having the time to take care of their meals and to sort it out themselves. Fine, we'll sort it out ourselves then. It's just cooking. What's so hard about that? Moran muttered huffily from where he was crouched on the ground, picking out the usable ingredients. What does Shudi want to eat? Whatever. Sigh, there's no dish more difficult to cook than the one called whatever. Let's see here. We have pork belly, napa cabbage. Tis, this bird sure is stingy. It's only the outer layers of the cabbage. There's quite a bit of rice and flour, but not sure how many days this is supposed to last us for. He muttered while counting the ingredients, then looked up at Chuaning. Do you want rice or noodles? Chuaning was resting on the bed, tummy down. He thought about it, then said, Noodles. A pause, then he added, Soup noodle with spare ribs. Ha! Where am I gonna get spare ribs from? Then whatever's fine. Moran sat cross-legged on the ground, one hand on his knee, cheeks squished against the other, and thought for a bit before saying, There's not many ingredients here. How about noodles with minced meat? Noodles with minced meat? Would you like that? Sure. Is it spicy? Moran grinned. There isn't even a shadow of a pepper in what the bird gave us. With dinner decided, Moran set about kneading the dough. Chuaning was short and not that strong, so he didn't even bother trying to make a pretense of helping. He watched Moran knead that soft white ball of dough from where he lay in bed, gaze growing softer. He suddenly felt that this wasn't bad after all. Moran didn't know who he was, so he could stay by his side just like this. And when Moran cooked, he'd bother to ask what he wanted to eat. It really wasn't bad. He even felt a little uneasy, as if he had been given too much, as if he had stolen it all from a child named Shasini. Moran finished cooking the noodles and put the stir-fried minced meat on top. They had pitifully few seasonings, so he couldn't really make anything fancy, but the noodles were pulled to a chewy consistency at just the right softness, and he had cut off the fatty part of the pork to fry the meat in. The mince sizzled as it was poured over the noodles. It'll be delicious mixed in. Shudi, dinner's... He looked up to find that Chuaning had fallen asleep, still lying tummy down like before, face turned to the side with his head pillowed on his arms, long eyelashes resting against his cheek, expression peaceful. Ready. He finished in a mumble, then walked over to the bed and stroked Chuaning's smooth, inky hair. Looking at you like this, you really do look like Shizun. I wonder what the relationship is between you, Shizun, and the Chu family of Linnan. And also, just who exactly is after us? Sigh. Wonder what Shizun's up to right now. If he knew what had happened here, would he blame me again regardless of all else? At that, the color in Moran's eyes darkened a little as he played with the strand of Chuanning's hair around his finger, sighing faintly. You don't know about him, but anytime anything happens, he always gives me hell. He really doesn't like me at all. But Chuanning was asleep, and these words scattered weightlessly into the silence of night without an answer, just like the misunderstandings coiled around them for decades and decades across 2 lifetimes. Moran waited for the noodles to cool down a bit before waking Chuanning up. Shudi, dinner's ready. Chuanning covered a yawn and blinked blearily. Oh, dinner! Moran carried the noodles over. He liked to cook, but hated doing the dishes, so just for the sake of having one less dish to wash, he had put the noodles directly into the pot he fried the mincemeat in. Chuanning was flabbergasted at this unorthodox and uncultured way of eating, his eyes wide as he stared disbelievingly at the big pot of noodles. How are we supposed to eat this? Together, of course. Moran handed him a pair of chopsticks and was already putting his hands together with a grin. The race to see who can scoop out more noodles is just about to begin. Who's gonna get to eat more? We're about to find out. ... Moran laughed gleefully, his eyes curved into little crescents. Chuanning stared at him a little. It's almost like as long as you have food, you're very happy, right? Haha, food is the most important thing after all, Moran said, then cheekily scooped up a big scoop of noodles for himself, slurping it all up until his cheeks were puffed out. It doesn't look great, but it's pretty tasty. ... Chuanning's expression was dark. Don't slurp while eating. Ha ha ha! Moran laughed, slapping his leg. How is a little kid like you this much like my Shizun? He also told me not to slurp. But you know what? Once when I was eating with him, I purposely threw a bone in his bowl, and he got mad. Ha 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 ha! Chuanning grit his teeth. Impudent! Yeah! That reaction exactly! How did you know? And even the delivery was just like him. Hey, Shudi! Seriously! I think you two might be distant relatives. Why don't you ask Shizun about it when he gets here? Oi! Wait! Not the egg! The egg's mine! End of chapter 71. Author's notes. Wei Yu Does Shudi want to eat rice or noodles? Big White Kitty. It's gotten cold. Why not eat dog meat? Sneer. I love when Shasuni is so sassy and he like teases Moran back. And I just love when he gets the upper hand and then Moran gets all flustered like in the previous chapter. But yeah, so in chapter 71, they have terrible timing. Moran had pulled out Jengui to check if his weapon had gotten stolen or something, and he has it, and at that very moment, everyone else from the Feathered Tribe come running in and see him holding Jengui, while poor Miss 18 is hanging by another Jengui in the cape. So they're like, wow, murderer? Of course, Moran is starting to panic, but then also feeling really distraught and defeated, like he believes that no one will believe in him. But luckily, Chuanning is there, and also Xuemeng and Shimei step up to defend him. And so they are put into containment or isolation while they investigate who the potential murderer could be. They're still suspects, but they aren't condemning them quite yet. So right now, Moran and Shasuni are trapped in like an imprisonment cave, and they're not being really fed well, so they're still given materials at least to cook. So Moran is cooking them up some dinner, and I just love to see that even when they're in this terrible situation, he is able to try to keep a bright face on to cheer up Shasuni, you know? And he's also really worried about Chuanning coming. Oh no, how is Shasuni gonna get out of the cave and then re-enter as Chuanning? Because they're gonna definitely call him to come from Shisheng Peak, and as we know, Chuanning isn't at Shisheng Peak. So we're gonna have to find out how Shasuni is gonna swap places with his older self. I wonder how many pills he has left. He has like 2 or 3 maybe? Anyway, wow. A murder has happened. Moran is a suspect. Who is this person that looks familiar to Chuanning? A lot of things to ponder on. Let me know what your theories are in the comments, guys. Other than that, thank you guys for listening, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye!